You are listening to the Tricorder Transmissions, episode 61. And now, here are Craig and Jeff.
Might as well keep those 6 shooters in your holsters because your imaginary bullets won't kill us as much as you wish they would. We are back to talk about Spectre of the Gun on the Tricorder Transmissions. Your host, Jeff Hewlett.
And Craig Cohen. And to talk about spoiler alert.
You know, hey, this is like a 50-year-old Trek episode, so if that was a spoiler to you, then shame on you. You can't call yourself a Trek fan if you've never seen this episode before.
Ooh.
No, I'm just kidding. I hope that there's people out there who haven't seen this stuff yet and are inspired to watch it. And I apologize for the spoiler alert there if it really was a spoiler. But I anticipate that not many people will have had their experiences spoiled by my my pithy intro.
I would actually be incredibly humbled if we found out that there was even one person out there that for their first pass of a certain episode, they did it with our commentary track.
Oh, I would too. It's or listen to our podcast about the episode before they watched it. Period. I mean, that's just how rare would that be? That would be a really good get.
Yeah.
So, what's been going on this week, Craig? Anything new?
Not really related to. I guess the only thing Star Trek related for me is we finally were able to get the electronic versions of our pictures from the convention.
Yes. We have to post them up on our website, on our Facebook page, so that people can see us with what we get. We had Shatner and
Nichelle Nichols,
and Peter Weller shot, right?
Yeah, Peter Weller as he was there at the convention for Admiral Marcus purposes, but we both really got him for RoboCop.
Yeah, we are both RoboCop fans. I think we've mentioned that before, but bears repeating that we're pretty big RoboCop fans over here. So Peter Weller was a pretty cool extra bonus for us.
Yeah, and it's actually out of the 3 photos, it's the best looking one in terms of he's got his arms around both of us and looks really, really thrilled to be there.
Yeah, he was very personable.
Not to say that any of the ops were bad, but
no.
If I had to pick a best looking one, that's the one I would present.
Oh, for sure. He's got a giant smile. He looks like he's actually enjoying himself a bit. So he was very nice, very gracious. So.
Yeah, definitely.
What
about you?
Well, there's some good news. These Are the Voyages Book 3 Kickstarter was a success. It has been funded and is now closed.
Right. That's why my account was charged.
Yeah, well, thank you to any Tricorder listeners who donated to that Kickstarter. We're very happy that it was a raging success and it exceeded its initial goal. So that's great. And we know Marc Cushman is very excited about signing these books and getting them out to all of us before Christmas.
Yeah, hopefully you did get on board because there were some great opportunities for folks that didn't have season 3 yet, of course, but also didn't have volume 1 or 2. There were all different kinds of levels there. So hopefully you got on board. And if not, there's always opportunities to get all 3 volumes at the official website. So you're not completely shut out.
Yeah, I believe Mark said that they'll be selling the 3rd book after the new year, but you can get a really good deal right now, as far as I know, on the website. It was a Black Friday, Cyber Monday type deal where you can get both books 1 and 2 for the bundle price, I think, of $79 and some change.
That's a great deal.
Yeah, it's a great deal, and Mark personalizes them for you, I found out. So, I mean, how can you go wrong with 2 incredible volumes? But speaking of Marc Cushman, he had a good bit of things to say about Spectre of the Gun, which is the episode that we're going to be talking about on our commentary this week.
Oh, cool. So we going to jump right into those?
Yeah, why don't we have a listen to what Mark has to say about Spectre of the Gun, and we'll come back and we'll talk a little bit about that as soon as he's done.
Well, let's start with the first one, Spectre of the Gun. It was written by Gene Coon. Why does it say Lee Cronin? You look in a lot of other books on Star Trek, or you look on the internet in a lot of places, and they'll tell you, well, he was embarrassed by the scripts he did in the third season. No, he was not. He loved that script, and everybody on Star Trek loved that episode. They all were in love with that episode, except, oddly enough, director Vincent McIvety. When I interviewed him, he said it wasn't his favorite, but you look at his ideas and what he did in that episode, the way he filmed it, where the Earps are all walking towards camera, and then the next time you go back, they're in a different position, where this guy's now on the left and this guy's on the right. That wasn't in the script. That was Vincent's idea, because he kept doing things to create the dreamlike effect. Bob Justman loved that episode because it was his idea to say, Jerry Pennerman claimed it was his idea, but whichever one of them came up with it, they probably came up with it, to make the sets minimalistic, incomplete. So I've just fragmented, because the Melkotians were taking all this out of Kirk's mind, and it was our memories aren't complete. And so there's just so many fun things in that episode that made it to the screen. You want to talk about what didn't make it to the screen? How about in the original treatments and the first draft of the script, Coon had it to where, I didn't tell you why he wrote it under Lee Cronin. I'll get back to that in a moment. Coon had it to where the reason the Melkotians wanted nothing to do with us is because they had been receiving television from Earth, and it took a few decades for the TV to get to them. And so they were watching 1960s television with all the violence, pre-1968, obviously. and so, combat and Man from Uncle and all the Westerns and the shoot 'em ups. And it was estimated with all those Westerns on TV in the 1950s that we killed the population of the Earth 3 times over. I read that once, and I believe it. They were watching all this stuff, and they wanted nothing to do with mankind. Who could blame them? They'd been watching our television. Imagine if they were watching it now and seeing things like Real Housewives of Orange County. My God.
True.
So that was a great idea that didn't make it in. Why didn't it make it in? Because NBC said, you can't put that in. You're making us look bad. You're making all the networks look bad. We're presenting quality programming. You can't say something like that on our network. So that's the fun for me, of the research and doing these books, writing the books, and I hope it's the fun of everybody who reads them, is you see the battle lines between the creative end and TV broadcasters, and why things got stopped and why they couldn't go on. And the thing for the fragmented sets, as great of an idea as it was mainly done out of budget. The budget had been so brutally cut. And they said, how can we build all this? So we don't have the money to go to a Western town. We got to shoot it on the soundstage. How can we afford this? And that's when Justman and Fenneman both came up with this idea individually that we'll do fragmented sets. And so sometimes out of desperation, you come up with an idea that makes it even better. Did you know? No, you didn't know. I found out from Vincent McIvety, and then I looked in the production records and confirmed it. One of the guys who played one of the Earps had to be replaced in the second day of filming, and they had to go back and reshoot everything.
Oh, so wow.
The episode went a day over. Why did he have to be replaced? He was a young actor, very, very talented, playing one of the younger Earps, and Vincent thought the world of him. They auditioned him. They'd seen a little film on him. They thought he was great. But he was so intimidated by being there on Star Trek and so freaked out by the surrealistic sets and the bizarre script and everything that it was just overwhelming to him. And he was just kind of losing it. And Vincent took him into the dressing room and tried to talk to him and said, pull it together, and he couldn't do it. And so he made the decision that we're just going to have to replace him and reshoot. Wow. And we're taking one of the other guys and bumping him up. You're going to play Wyatt Earp instead of Virgil Earp or whatever, and we're going to find a new actor to come in and play the character you were going to play, and that way I can at least get something shot this afternoon, and then we'll bring somebody in fresh in the morning. And these are the battles that get fought as you're doing a TV show.
All right. Well, that was some really good information. And I know that this is one of our top Facebook contributors, Matt Walsky's favorite third season episode.
Yeah, I know he was pretty happy with those comments from Mark when they were originally aired on our Volume 3 Kickstarter episode we did.
Yeah, I wonder if Matt ordered a copy of the book. We're going to have to ask him about that.
Yeah.
Matt, if you're listening to this, let us know if you bought into the Kickstarter, and we'd love to know. So let's jump into Spectre of the Gun. Are you ready to talk, Craig?
Oh, yeah.
All right. Well, Spectre of the Gun aired on October 25th of 1968. Remaster, July 19th, 2008.
All right. And in this episode, Kirk, Spock, McCoy, Scotty, and Chekhov are forced to reenact the gunfight at the OK Corral in Tombstone as the team that lost the gunfight.
All right. So let's get our commentary started in 3, 2, 1.
All right, so there it is, that familiar sight.
Yeah, good old Enterprise. Slightly off frame, too. The right-hand side, well, actually the left-hand side of the saucer was off the side of the screen there. That's interesting.
Yeah, it seems like a lot of the bigger liberties they took with the remastering of the effects involved a lot of the external ship shots. I guess that's where they could get most creative without really getting people, I guess, riding them too hard about changing the functional narrative of the scene, if you will.
Sure. That and some of these alien spacecraft, like this weird looking object, this metallic object we're seeing floating out in space. Actually, almost from a distance looked like Nomad again.
I was going to say that.
Wouldn't that be really cool if Nomad showed up?
Yeah, he's like, hey guys, I'm back. Why not?
Yeah, sure. Something that I noticed about this scene that we're watching right now, this initial scene, is that Kirk calls Spock science officer twice.
Yeah.
Thank you, science officer.
Yeah,
so strange.
Really weird. And this is one of the Gene L. Kuhn episodes that he wrote under the name Lee Cronin. So it is really weird that they went with that formal delivery. And this isn't a first-time director either. This is actually Vincent McEvity's last episode of the series, of the 6 total that he directed. So yeah, that is kind of an odd choice there. Maybe everybody involved was just so checked out at this point.
Yeah, I don't know, man. And now that I'm seeing this shot over Kirk's shoulder and looking at Uhura and the way that she's seated there, I'm wondering if ergonomics are really not a concern in Star Trek time, because that seating position looks as if it would cause her some serious strain over time.
Yeah, you'd almost think that her control panel should be in front of her, sort of like the panel is in front of Chekhov and Sulu normally. Yeah,
very interesting. She sits kind of cocked half sideways with her legs crossed, and one arm reaches further up the console than the other. It's almost like she's positioned in such a way that she can kind of glance over and look at the view screen without having to spin her seat around too much.
Yeah.
So we're seeing a probe, some sort of a probe that's sent by the this race called the Melkotians, who are on a planet not far away. And this probe, which is fascinating to me, telepathically communicates to members of the Enterprise crew in apparently different languages. So Kirk hears it in English and remarks that it's speaking English. And then I think Chekhov says it's speaking Russian, and Uhura said it's speaking Swahili.
Yeah.
But I guess it somehow knows your native language.
Yeah, it's got a built-in universal translator.
Yeah, that it's weird that it would be able to detect. It would have to be the reach into your mind somehow. Turn up your mental Rolodex and look up the language, primary language or first language attribute, and see what your first learned language was, or none of them seem to have. They're all English speakers.
Yeah.
So it seems kind of like a waste for this thing to broadcast something in Russian when Chekhov is perfectly capable of understanding English.
Yeah.
But
this voice, by the way, is Abraham Sophia, who died in 1988, well into his 90s. He was born in the 1800s. And one notable thing, and you probably know that me and Jeff are featured on another podcast about a 60s show. about the monkeys called Zilch, and we have a Zilch connection here. Abraham was featured in the episode. In the film Head.
Oh, really?
In the sauna scene.
Oh, great.
He was the Swami who advises Peter Tork.
Very cool. Very cool.
Yeah, and not to get way off track, but we did meet Peter Tork the other night, which was very, very neat.
Yeah, that was really, really awesome. I'm looking forward to talking about that on Zilch in an upcoming episode.
Yeah, so if you're at all interested in the Monkees as a band or as a television and movie unit, Zilch is right up your alley, and you can find that by just Googling Zilch podcast.
Yeah, and well, another kind of Head connection here is that, Head is pretty surreal, and this episode of Star Trek is pretty surreal as well. So a lot of very interesting, set choices that were, of course, driven by the limited budget.
Yeah, it's kind of neat, and Mark spoke about that when we talked to him, and it's one of those things where when they get to it, they'll explain why they think the sets are the way they are, and it's one of those things where I often wonder. I didn't really think about it when I watched this episode initially. I wonder how obvious the budget limitations there were for a lot of people, or if they just accepted the explanation that's presented.
Yeah, I know for a fact that I never thought that the special effects or the sets in this show were dictated by budget until I started to dive into it a lot more. When I was younger and I was watching this back in the 70s and in syndication in the 80s, when I was a kid, I mean, I never thought for a minute about, what went on behind the scenes. I just liked, it was a space show, and, you had some cool aliens, and Mr. Spock was awesome. And, and then once I got older and and especially once we started doing the show and I doing a lot of reading, and I started to realize that, a lot of the things that I took for granted as, normal were really, difficult choices based on, a limited amount of money, especially in this third season.
Yeah, and it's interesting because you almost think of it, you can think of it two ways, whereas, being informed of the challenges that people ran into when they were working on productions sort of puts a spotlight on things to look out for and things to appreciate and things to sort of forgive. But at the same time, I think it's kind of cool sometimes, having no knowledge of things. I almost think that, like, if you look at movies nowadays, everybody's always, so drawn by what the box office was for the movies that weekend and what movies cost against what they made. Mm-hmm. And it almost seems like a detail that doesn't really need to exist. Like, what does it matter to me what a movie cost to make and whether or not it made its studio money? Yeah. All that really matters to me is whether the movie entertained me.
Yeah, exactly.
So here we go into the Old West.
Yeah.
And the main thing I really love about this is that red sky.
Yeah, that's a really interesting choice, and it adds to that surreal nature of this show, because you've got these set piece, building, the fronts of buildings, these facades with just standing there with nothing behind them. So
yeah,
it's almost as if it's something out of a dream, and it also bears mentioning that this. Just now, that the scene that we just passed, where the Enterprise crew arrives on the planet, they once again did something that I've kind of called out as something that irks me sometimes about these episodes, is that they inexplicably disable all of the technology that they brought with them. So can't transport back up, communicators don't work, phasers don't work, nothing works. So I know it's convenient, and they kind of had to do it to make the episode work, but it's all this really cool gadgetry and technology is they always have to have some sort of a way to disable it all and just to make the story work.
Yeah, and the other interesting thing here is, as we go on, it's almost presented to us where the crew believes that they have somehow been involved in time travel, which the sets or the environment they're in doesn't really doesn't convey that. So it's funny that they didn't think they were in some kind of simulation or recreation as opposed to traveling through time.
Yeah, and the newspaper thing that Kirk just showed said October 26, 1881.
Yeah.
So I guess maybe that may contribute to them thinking they've time traveled. Although, the Spock and Kirk seem to have some pretty deep knowledge about this time period and the events of this time period, which I find kind of interesting that this is the 23rd century. They're still so well versed with the OK Corral.
Yeah, yeah.
But, you would think with the knowledge that they seem to have that they would realize that right away that this is definitely not a time travel type scenario.
Yeah, I mean, for me, you'd think that the environment would really, indicate that. So sure. Now we get an indication that they are playing a role, or they are not being seen as we are seeing them.
Yeah, and that leads me to another question: is why do their phasers transform into revolvers, but their uniforms don't change?
I guess that was solely for our benefit.
Yeah, probably. But something that I found interesting about the aliens, the Melkotians themselves, it is that they somehow they say that Kirk and company need to be punished for coming to the planet despite their warnings, and they recognize Kirk's authority over his crew and say he is responsible for what they did. He gave the order, and I found it fascinating that aliens that have no contact with humans and a completely different society would have the same rules, the same crimes and punishments that we've developed in our own society. It would just seem to me that these aliens who have these incredible powers would be so far beyond crime and punishment. I don't know. It seems strange to me that it would, and of course it doesn't even just kill them outright. It puts them into a scenario in which they'll wind up dying eventually.
Yeah.
It just seems very interesting.
Yeah. Well, this episode overall, especially towards the end, it sort of presents the idea that most alien races in this universe are extremely skeptical of humans and expect the worst from them. So this is really just another episode that that showcases that humanity is able to evolve past its violent origins.
True. Good observation. And, they probably are wary with good reason.
Yeah.
Oh, and here we see our first ERP.
Yeah.
And if I'm not mistaken, that is the ERP who winds up in Star Trek V.
Oh, right. Okay, cool. Yeah, I remember Matt had mentioned that on the Facebook page.
Yeah, I believe that's Morgan ERP, right? I believe he is the right-hand man of Sybok in Star Trek V, my beloved Star Trek V.
Totally. And the one thing that's really interesting about this episode for me is, we sort of grew up in a world where, and it seems like even in the 60s this was the case, where the ERPs were really looked upon as the good guys. Mm-hmm. And especially we got movies like the Kevin Costner movie Wyatt Earp and the Kurt Russell movie Tombstone, which I'm a huge fan of.
Yep.
That really painted them as, the good guys. And in this episode, they're really, really painted in I don't want to say a bad light, but in definitely a not too flattering light.
That's a great observation. I didn't even think about that. And you're right. This episode puts the Enterprise crew in the shoes of the Clantons, and who I guess we're supposed to believe are the good guys in this.
Yeah.
Or are we supposed to believe that the Star Trek crew members actually made them into the good guys in this?
Yeah, that's a great observation as well. But there is one moment in here that was very weird for me, and it occurs later in the episode where one of the townspeople sort of says, if you want to take care of this ERP problem, it's up to you.
Yeah, and I think they say that the townspeople are counting on you to get rid of the ERPs or something like that.
Yeah, and I mean, at this point, we had already had the Clementine movie. I forgot the full title of it. I believe in the 50s. And we even had Wyatt Earp's mostly fictitious biography that had been published shortly after his death. So they were definitely on on people's radar, and they had already become legend, if you will. But it's kind of neat. That's my biggest sort of takeaway from this episode, is how you can slightly skew the perspective and showcase how perspective really dictates who's good and who's bad, based on who's telling the story.
Yeah. Speaking of skewing perspective, this is one of the episodes in which Kirk doesn't get the girl. Chekhov's in the center stage for the ladies on this one.
Yeah, and it seems to bother him a little bit.
Yeah, it does. It does. He calls out Chekhov quite a few times for fraternizing with this girl. But I find it fascinating too. And over the course of the episode, we'll see this a couple different times, that Chekhov seems to be very attached to this girl that who he knows isn't real, and he literally just met. Doesn't it seem strange? I mean, he's willing to get into a gunfight here in an imaginary bar to defend this girl, and then later on, other things happen. We'll get to them when we get to them, but it just seems strange to me that he plays along so willingly with this.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe Chekhov has that addictive personality that a lot of us have, where you get caught up in a moment and you want to take it as far as you can.
Yeah, I guess it's like any dream sequence. If someone's coming on to you in a dream sequence, I guess you just go with it, huh?
Yeah.
There he goes.
It's a tough spot. I can understand why Chekhov does what he does this episode.
Sure, why not? He probably doesn't get that many opportunities.
And he even calls out to the captain. He says, "Hey, I'm trying to improve relations between us."
Yeah, he's taking the prime directive to a different end. And here's an interesting shot where you're seeing them sitting at this table with this bottle of booze, but you see a picture that is supposed to be mounted on a wall back there, but it's just kind of like hanging out, sitting on top of a clock, but it's in such a way that it would have been mounted if there was a wall there, right?
Yeah.
So it's an interesting set choice. So it looks as if they've boxed the bar in with like a waist height wall. But other than that, and the front facade, there are no real walls and no roof.
Right.
So this is a very different style of episode for Star Trek, and it's I don't know if it's off-putting or if it's endearing. I can't make up my mind about it.
Yeah, maybe is there a word in between?
Maybe for the linguists out there, let us know.
It almost has like a community theater or a high school theater feel to it for me.
Yeah. Yes, that's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
And Kirk is trying to convince the bartender that he's not a Clanton, and he's going to use his uniform as a way to try to convince him. So Kirk is very aware that his uniform is still his uniform.
Yeah.
And he even gets the guy to feel the fabric of the uniform.
Yeah, and it feels the same as his.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, and at this point, the crew has figured out the significance of the date, the significance of who they are, and basically they are now up against the ticking clock.
Yep, there's your ticking clock moment, Craig, your time bomb.
Yeah, and it's funny, if this was a season 1 episode, we would have had some kind of scenario on the Enterprise that enabled us to cut back to them every once in a while. Remember that edict from the first season that, the Enterprise always had to be in jeopardy as well?
Yeah.
It's interesting to sort of think about season 3 episodes in that light.
That's actually a really good idea. One day we should go back and do some compare and contrast.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that'd be an interesting observation. So look at the length of that revolver.
Yeah.
The barrel is huge.
That is a 6-shooter.
Now, look, there's a jail you could easily escape from. There's just some steel bars and a landscape behind them.
Yeah. And here's a really dangerous situation for Kirk, where he basically goes in and he's trying to plead with the Earps that he's not a Clanton. They're not buying it, of course. But at the same time, I mean, this episode does sort of escalate to violence, but it could have ended really, really badly.
Yeah, it could have, and Kirk could have met his end right here, and later on, McCoy could have met his end. We'll see that, and Chekhov will run into some issues, and there's a lot of tense scenes in this. But I have to say, this particular scene, Kirk plays, or Shatner rather, plays the scene very coolly. I like the way it's very tense. I mean, you can see the intensity from the two Earps in the room, but
yeah.
Kirk is just kind of, he takes a hit to the face and just kind of spins the guy around and then holds his hands up and he just doesn't give in. And we've seen Kirk in the past, give in to his temper. Oh, and once again, this is something I don't think we've mentioned in a few episodes, but this dramatic lighting, once again, used very effectively here. But they don't show Kirk that way. They show the Earps with this dramatic lighting to make them look more menacing and more evil. But Kirk has a softer light with some softer shadows to put him in a more friendly position. It looks like maybe even some sort of a softener on him, or a diffuser maybe, doesn't it?
Yeah. Excellent observation.
Yeah, pretty cool how sharp and clear the two Earps are with their lighting. But Kirk comes off a little softer. So very interesting fade to commercial there. So Kirk apparently back at the bar and has some injuries. And McCoy is treating him with alcohol on a rag.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. And he's going to take a hit, make himself feel a little bit better. But interesting that the Malkotians, what they chose to leave in the scenario and what they chose to take out of the scenario. So they leave booze in the scenario. You know what I mean? It's that they obviously, the Malkotians are controlling all of these projections.
Yeah.
Right? So they're controlling what is added and what is omitted. And they've omitted walls from the buildings, but they chose to leave bottles of drinkable alcohol and a piano in the background. So Spock, this is another interesting thing about this episode, and it quickly changes. But Spock is kind of throwing his hands up here and saying that there's no technological solution that he can come up with, because there are no materials in this time period or this dream sequence or whatever it is that they're in that will allow him to make the phasers work or the communicators work or otherwise make any sort of technological gadget, kind of like the way he did in City on the Edge of Forever.
Yeah, I was just going to say that they had the means and the opportunity to do that in the City on the Edge of Forever. So it's interesting that 40 some odd years earlier, and I guess in an artificial environment, it's not possible.
Yeah, that doesn't appear so, unless of course the Malkotians made it so that they would have some sort of an opportunity to make some sort of device to get out of it, but they did not.
Yeah, I love the way that the gun belts hang, especially on Spock.
Yeah, it's very, and there's a force field. But yeah, it's interesting because it reminds me a lot of those the leather belts that they used to have early in the first season. You saw them a couple of times that the phaser would attach to,
right?
Before they got rid of them. So yeah, they have these Chekhov has two guns. I just noticed that. There's a clock hanging in the middle of space.
Yeah,
but so now we're finding out that the Malkotians are not going to allow the Enterprise crew to just waltz out of town and avoid the scenario. They're going to force them to live out this sequence, and you wonder why. I don't want to diffuse the whole episode, but I'm wondering why would they bother putting them through this whole thing if they just wanted them killed anyway? Yeah,
well, maybe it's an experiment on seeing how they react.
Exactly.
It's giving them the benefit of the doubt. I'm wondering though if they create different scenarios from history for different offenders.
That's possible.
Or does everybody just get dropped into the OK Corral program?
I guess the episode wants you to believe that the aliens took this scenario from the minds of, or the mind of Kirk, or the minds of the Enterprise crew, but I wonder why they would settle on this. out of all of the things that they've been through, and all the more recent and stronger visions and stories in their heads, they would take the OK Corral.
Yeah.
Why wouldn't they take the Gorn?
Yeah.
Of course, I haven't mentioned the Gorn in a while, so I felt that I should. But we've seen a lot of these inescapable scenarios, right?
Yeah.
That the crew's been through. That would be much more menacing and difficult than this one. But so Spock has made a 180, and now he's saying that he can come up with a tranquilizer grenade bomb type thing that he can use to knock out the ERPs at the OK Corral.
Yeah.
And allow them to survive past 5 o'clock. Yeah. But McCoy will need to get these chemicals that are conveniently left into the scenario by the Melkotians from this barber / dentist / doctor of sorts.
Yeah, in a situation where there is somebody who's actually being attended to.
Yeah, and this is a great plot device, or it's kind of something we've seen used in a bunch of other places and movies, and how dramatically the towel was lifted off the face to reveal it's Doc Holliday, another ERP. So, and of course, this is interesting to me that Doc Holliday allows McCoy, who is a rival, a Clanton, to use some of his medical materials.
Yeah.
So you would think that would be a definite no. But McCoy is, I guess, convincing enough.
The one thing that really sort of makes me think when I watch episodes like this is they've created a mini sort of universe, if you will, occupied by these people and things that think and act on their own. I don't know. It just, to me, it creates all kinds of questions about. I don't want to say the ethics of it, because I'm not sure that this alien race is really held to any kind of ethics. But this Doc Holliday is obviously a living, breathing, thinking human. Who is going to cease to exist when this episode ends.
Yeah, well, are they projections, or are they actually Melkotians who are disguised as humans?
That's a scenario that I would be interested in, because it seems like they're beyond advanced AI in terms of how they operate and how they function.
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, you guess you have to kind of debate what you think this scenario is. I mean, I don't want to jump to the end of the episode, but is it a joint dream that they're all having, a shared dream? Is this a projected place, and that they're all in? They've been placed in a certain area where all of this stuff is almost like holograms or whatnot, kind of like the holodeck, or are they all these people actually Melkotians, or are they projections or holograms or something of that nature? It's so many possibilities. I mean, I guess when you get to the end of the episode, it kind of becomes a little bit clearer as to what they were just involved in. But
yeah, but not too much though. I when Spock sort of figures things out, I almost thought of it sort of like the Matrix. Mm-hmm. It seems like the Matrix. It seems like they're playing by Matrix rules here, with the idea that if you die in the Matrix, you die in the real world.
Yep.
Spoiler alert for a 15-year-old movie.
Well, it's about to not be a spoiler.
Yeah.
This is an interesting sequence too, in that here's Chekhov, really getting into this chick.
Yeah.
That he knows isn't real. I mean, even if she was real, she's an alien, she's a Melkotian. What's he gonna take her back to the Enterprise with him? Yeah. But yeah, at least he's saying that it's not possible for them to get married. He's not giving in to that level. He'll make out with her, but he won't have a fake alien dream sequence wedding with her. No way. But it's a shame. I feel bad for poor Chekhov because he's got a girl who wants to marry him, and he's just he's relegated to sitting at the console in the Enterprise bridge.
Yeah. Now, do you think and I guess we'll speak to this after this action scene here, where we're going to get a pretty dramatic moment, and we've always talked about these situations where a character on a show dies, and at what point did the audience know that they were going to come back? And this is really a death that, to me, feels like it could have been permanent.
Yeah, this is almost like the Tasha Yar death, isn't it?
Yeah. And I mean, you're deep into the third season, or you're not deep. You're a handful of episodes into the third season at this point. And Chekhov doesn't normally go down on these away missions.
No, he doesn't. Usually that's left up to the red shirts.
Yeah, that was my other sort of what I wanted to speak about before this whole dramatic this action scene unfolded. Is the choice of the away team is really weird, because who is up on the ship? Who has command of the Enterprise right now?
Who knows? Because Sulu isn't in this episode.
Exactly, and Scotty's normally the number 3 man.
Yep.
So I almost wonder if it's within protocol to have this many high-ranking officers, off the Enterprise.
Yeah, it's very questionable. Very questionable choice for an away team. So you have 5 of the 7, heavy hitters, if you will. And we're also down 1 because Sulu's not in this episode for one reason or another. So maybe Uhura's in charge.
Yeah. And yeah, we never cut back to the Enterprise to see. And I guess the ending of this episode almost makes it seem like it was a blink of an eye moment for them.
Yeah, perhaps. But so we can add Chekhov to the list of original series main characters who died at least once.
Yeah.
In some capacity. So I think everybody on this away crew except for Scotty has died at least once so far, right?
Yeah. Because McCoy we had in the shore leave.
Yep.
And Kirk's had he's died a couple times, right?
Yep, he's died a couple times. We had a mock death and a muck time.
Yes.
Yeah, and
there was another one, wasn't there?
Yeah. What was when did Spock? What was Spock's death? Why is it escaping me?
Yeah, I don't know. We've just pulled our pants down and revealed ourselves.
That's quite all right. We've probably lost half the audience by now anyway with this commentary.
But yes, I think with the exception of Scotty, everybody on this away team has... Actually, do we ever actually see them beam down?
No.
Yeah, although Kirk does say he does call for this away team.
He does.
Yeah.
Yeah, he does. So Spock is now figuring out that this scenario is playing out differently than it did in history.
Right.
They've already changed because Chekhov died. That didn't happen in the original timeline or the original story, right?
Yes.
So now he has logically come to the conclusion that because the scenario is changeable, that they can, in fact, affect change themselves.
Right.
So he is going to come up with a potential solution to this problem, one with this smoke grenade, but the more interesting solution comes later, which I think is actually a fascinating part of this episode. I'm looking forward to actually talking about that part later.
Yeah.
When it comes out.
And we also had a little bit of Scotty and McCoy being frustrated with Spock's lack of reaction to Chekhov's death.
Oh yeah, good. Yeah, good. I didn't pick up on that. Yeah, that's interesting. Well, Spock, of course. I mean, he's been blasted in the past for being insensitive to the plights of other crew members who were injured or were killed. And the Galileo 7 comes to mind.
Yeah.
Where the crew of the Galileo pretty much mutinied against Spock, or were going to mutiny against Spock because he was so unfeeling towards crew members who had been killed in the line of duty, and was so quick to seemingly send them to their potential deaths. So that doesn't surprise me that he wouldn't have much of a reaction to Chekhov.
Yeah, but it is funny. During that discussion, there was one moment where Spock says to Kirk, he goes, Scott and McCoy clearly forget that I'm half human," which to me was a great moment for Spock, because it showcased that even though he wasn't visually showing any kind of emotion regarding Chekhov's death, that line to me seemed to indicate that he was at least processing it on an emotional level inside.
Hmm. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Definitely. The remarking that he's half human, I guess, implies that the human half of him felt something, but the Vulcan logical half of him was stronger and could suppress it all.
Yeah, and that was it's such a throwaway line, but for me that really it it helped further illustrate the internal struggle that Spock has throughout this series and throughout the movies.
Yeah, it's a brief glimpse of character development in this episode where we're pretty much devoid of character development. And, we're seeing a scene, we're seeing a typical Shatner overacting scene here, where this is another one of the ones that people would cite as one of the typical, this is, the swaggering Captain Kirk who's, screaming and yelling here. But interesting exchange as he's trying to convince the sheriff to help him, take out the ERPs and help get the people organized against the ERPs. But, his, there's quite a bit of intensity here, and some hand gesturing with the fists and things that are, this is the kind of the stuff that people always rag on Shatner for.
Yeah,
calling him hammy and whatnot.
Mm-hmm. But I think this episode overall is a great showcase for Kirk, and his obligation to resolve things in a nonviolent manner.
Well, I don't know. He's used violence quite a bit in the past. I mean,
well, he has, but I mean, here he's not embracing what the accepted solution here should be, which is to go to the OK Corral and just try to outdraw the ERPs. Mm. Whereas here they're really trying to find the non-violent way to do this.
I wonder if that's a product of the non-violence mandate that Marc Cushman talked about in the third season.
It very well could be. I didn't even make that connection, and I should have. Yeah. But overall, I think it's a really good illustration of how these Starfleet captains really should be thinking when they're out in the field, if you will.
Yeah, Prime Directive would dictate that they shouldn't use violence unless they absolutely have to.
Well, I mean, they're also coming from a society so much different than the one that we know today, where there are so little problems and so many, seemingly all of the differences that we have as a species have been resolved, which is a mind-blowing concept to think about, and really what makes Roddenberry's version of the future so appealing to so many people. That you've reached this point where we're not fighting over things like religion or an economic divide or any of the other things that sort of create divisions among people. I don't know. It just really makes you wonder what path or what alternate path Star Trek took to get there than the path that we're on right now. Because, I don't know, it seems like a lot of times humanity just sort of chases its tail.
Well, I guess we could go and read some of the Star Trek lore books, history books, and just apply that to our modern society today, and we'd be there. Sounds like a plan to me. We're two of us are on board. Let's get everybody else on board. Peace in our time.
Yeah. So one plan that didn't work was Spock's knockout bomb.
Yeah. Unfortunately, it didn't knock Scotty out.
Yeah, Scotty volunteered. He said, "I'll volunteer to test it as long as you guarantee me that I'll be awake by 5 o'clock."
Yep. So he wanted to be there to fight it out with the ERPs at the OK Corral, but fortunately for Scotty, the the canister of tranquilizer did absolutely nothing. So now we have to wonder, and Spock and McCoy are insisting that it should have worked.
Yeah, and that's where Spock really introduces a really sinister idea.
Yes. It's
that their thought processes have possibly been modified.
Yep. And now the Melkotians have teleported the remaining crew members to the OK Corral so that they can't possibly avoid the scenario. And so now we're seeing that there's kind of an unfair slant to this scenario where, no matter what solutions they came up with to this point, it wouldn't have mattered, right? Because the Melkotians are still going to put them, and there's force fields there they can't get past, so they're stuck. So that's kind of an unfair
But there's
scenario.
one thing, it is, but the one thing the Melkotians didn't bank on is dealing with somebody who has experience with unfair or, dare I say, unwinnable scenarios.
True, but is this another scenario where without Spock, they wouldn't have been able to figure this out?
They wouldn't have been able to figure it out the way that Spock figured it out, that's for sure.
No, and they wouldn't have been able to condition their minds without Spock's help.
Mm-hmm.
So
is
Spock
it possible could they have just straight up outdrawn the ERPs? And what would have happened if they did?
Kirk, maybe. McCoy, definitely not. McCoy's not physical. McCoy's not a phaser jockey. He's not used to, drawing a phaser. Or I think maybe Spock and Kirk, or even maybe Scotty, could have drawn as fast as an ERP. Who knows? But they're not used to wielding heavier pistols, right? They're used to wielding I almost said lightsabers. They're used to wielding phasers. So
obviously, you've got that Star Wars 7 trailer on your mind.
Yeah, I watched it once, but let's not get into that.
I was going to say though, do you think though that McCoy and Kirk and Scotty and Spock have the 23rd century advantage here in the sense that they have a couple hundred years of evolution on their side that could have possibly improved their hand-eye coordination that would make, just the average, Dr. McCoy, if he was transported back to the 1800s, he'd be able to react with the quickness that a skilled gunfighter could.
Nah, I don't think so. I don't know. That's a bit of a stretch for me. It's a bit of a stretch. Maybe if you said McCoy created some sort of a stimulant or something that made them have quicker reflexes, I could buy into it, but I don't know. But thankfully, they have Spock to save the day, and he is going to.
So now,
go ahead.
I was going to say Spock basically explains that if we don't believe the bullets are real, they can't hurt us. And McCoy says, we're human beings. We have too much doubt. What if there's even 1% of us, 1% of our thoughts that think the bullets are real? And Spock says, well, then you're going to die probably. And that's where Kirk comes up with the mind meld idea, which I guess is another use of the mind meld.
Yeah, I love that Kirk is the one that suggests the mind meld, not Spock. I thought that was interesting that, Kirk immediately jumps to, hey, we can fix this with the mind meld. So, but,
And what he's pretty much just implanting, it's interesting the stance that Spock took there where he almost went side by side to McCoy.
Yeah, it's almost like
or to Scotty.
It's almost like hypnosis in a way.
Yeah, he's implanting an
idea.
Unreal.
But I think this if you watched Inception, Christopher Nolan has a whole different idea of implanting ideas. He said it's almost impossible to do. Apparently, if he had Spock on his side, he could implant a memory very easy or an idea very easily.
Right.
So Spock is implanting the idea that the bullets in the guns don't exist and they can't hurt you. So therefore, these imaginary projected bullets. Look at these camera shots of the ERPs forming up. Aren't they? They seem almost militaristic, don't they?
Yeah.
Yeah, you have you have Morgan Earp standing there. The two other Earps walk up past him, and then Morgan joins along with them, and then they happen upon Doc Holliday, who's just standing in the middle of nowhere. And I guess it's meant to remind us that the time is ticking away.
Yes.
And the Kirk and company are very soon to be faced with these unflappable, unwaverable Earps who are bent on killing them.
Yeah. Now, after this, is Spock going to have to go back in and sort of remove the suggestion?
Nah. You can leave it.
Or is it just going to make them... I don't know. I just fear that I would start thinking that phasers were unreal and couldn't hurt me.
Yeah, I guess.
And here we're going to get we're going to get a great effect here.
Yes, this is
where
pretty cool.
They shoot. Yeah, and I almost want to watch this because I haven't really analyzed it.
Yeah, we're seeing bullet holes.
Well, I guess they were just
popping through the wooden fence.
Through the wood. Yeah, I assume they probably. God, I'm trying to figure out how they would have done that without. Maybe they had the pre-cut stuff on a. They had the holes there already, and they had maybe fishing line.
Yeah, who knows?
Because I doubt they were doing any kind of explosives that close to the actors.
Yeah, probably not.
Boom, drop kick.
There's Kirk with his wrestling moves. But did you notice how many shots they fired out of those revolvers without running out of bullets? Entirely too many.
At least 24?
At least. Entirely too many. But I guess they don't have to have... they don't have to reload because it's not real anyway. So that explains.
And here we get the classic "I'm not going to kill you" moment. I'm better than that. And Spock gives us the fascinating cue.
Yep. So once again, Kirk and company pass the test. The Earps vanish, and we're back on the Enterprise. And dun, 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 Chekhov's alive.
Yeah, and we just get the explanation that it really did seem like it was just a moment in time for the Enterprise crew.
Yep, Chekhov doesn't remember anything. But he remembers the girl. He remembers the girl. So beautiful, so real. And he doesn't remember anything else. So I guess the Melkotians were nice. They let him remember the good part. And he doesn't have to remember the bad part. He doesn't have to remember dying. But and it looks like the Melkotian object is back again. So are we about to start the loop all over again? Could this have been one of those cyclical episodes that just they get stuck in some sort of a loop?
Goodness.
Oh, thank God Kirk didn't press that jettison pod button there. He was awful close. Wasn't he looking?
Oh, goodness.
Yeah, phaser gun. Now, this is weird to me. I mean, so Kirk, they choose to blow up this, whatever this object is, this satellite or this probe or whatever, and the Melkotians just don't seem to care. I was kind of scratching my head at that. What was the purpose of that thing? I don't know.
Yeah, it didn't seem like the Enterprise destroyed it, though.
I thought they fired the phasers at it and blew it up.
Oh, did they?
Oh, there's the disembodied pumpkin head Melkotian again.
Yeah.
And, of course, they're stunned and shocked and awed that the Enterprise crew didn't kill. So this is pretty much the same test that Kirk went through when he fought the Gorn.
Exactly. Yeah. And it seems like these alien races are really sort of their biggest stereotype, I guess, against the Starfleet in general is that we or that they are prone to just violence before anything else.
Yeah, I guess the only thing they know about people is that all the YouTube clips of Grand Theft Auto playthroughs that they've been watching, and I guess they figure that's what people are like. But,
too much.
Yeah. Well, I guess that brings us to the end of Spectre of the Gun.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another episode.
So, yeah. So, from an essential standpoint, I know that this is an episode that a lot of people talk about I'm not entirely sure that this would fall under any kind of cocktail party rule for me.
Oh, I was going to bring that up.
Okay.
I was going to ask you about it.
Yeah, but for me, I don't know. It just seems like this is maybe a fringe episode in that regard, where it's more of a, I don't want to say hardcore Trek fan, but I don't know. It doesn't, for me, I'm not sure that this would be a cocktail party episode. I could be wrong, though, and let us know if I am wrong. I love being proven wrong. But at the same time, I would say that the only thing that this episode really introduces that would make it essential is Spock's use of the mind meld to sort of give them that boost of confidence. And I guess I want to have you decide. And I know I've done this the past couple of weeks now, but if we don't determine that mind meld is really a make or break moment, I'm going to say this is a non-essential episode.
Yeah, I'm leaning towards non-essential myself. I don't think that that's something that we haven't seen at least a variation of before. I know Spock's been able to control people with the mind meld. He's been able to will people to do things. So I don't necessarily think this is far removed from that. I guess what you're really getting at is does this episode demonstrate that the mind meld is a two-way communication as opposed to just Spock reading your mind? But we've seen it be a two-way communication prior to this. So I don't think that I can use that to call this episode essential. And I know that this is an episode that a lot of people like. I know Marc Cushman really enjoys this, and I know Matt really likes this, and I know other people who have good things to say about this, but my essential criteria don't allow me to call this an essential episode, as there are no real series firsts here, and we don't learn anything new necessarily about any of the characters, and we don't have any really recurring aliens that we have to deal with. So, unfortunately, double non-essential for Spectre of the Gun.
Hey, it happens, and who knows? Maybe when we revisit season 3 at the end and do our wrap up, we can be convinced otherwise.
Perhaps we can.
All right, so I guess that brings us to the end of another episode, and we've referenced our Facebook page a lot and our web page, but you can also interact with us on Twitter at TTT_pod. And we've continued to really enjoy all of the interactions that we've had on the website and on the Facebook page and on Twitter. So please keep it coming.
Yeah, absolutely. So we look forward to hearing from you guys on this episode and other episodes. So,
yep, I guess I'll talk to you next Sunday, Jeff.
Yeah, we'll be back next week. Take it easy, everybody.
In this episode, Spectre of the Gun, the first frontier meets the final frontier. The classic American West set against the infinity of space. This episode was quite different than the usual big message stories for which the series was known. The highly stylized recreation of the famous gunfight at OK Corral and the entire episode had an almost comic book feeling about it. Originally titled The Last Gunfighter, this episode didn't please Leonard Nimoy, who had definite problems with the plot. He felt it was an unrealistic story which contained many character inconsistencies and gratuitous violence. Interestingly, this episode was written by none other than Gene Coon. At this point, he had left his staff job at Star Trek and was under contract elsewhere. Since he couldn't legally write for the series as Gene Coon anymore, he used his pseudonym Lee Cronin.
The episode was Spectre of the Gun, and I played Wyatt Earp. It was a strange situation because Rex Holman and Charlie Maxwell and I were hired to be the 3 Earp boys.
Take my bag.
And then Sam Gilman was hired to be Doc Holliday. When we read the script, at least speaking for myself, it really looked like somewhat of a dud. And when we showed up on the set and saw the stylized buildings and so on and so forth, it seemed to be even more of a dud. And the director, Vince McAvity, who was a very nice guy, he would juxtapose our positions, you know, and it was all part of the design of the show to make it more of a surrealistic fantasy kind of thing, you know, where in one cut we were walking a certain way in terms of our relationship to each other, and then the next cut, for no reason at all, we were completely reversed, which didn't make a lot of sense to us, but made a lot of sense to him, and he was right, because the show, in a very strange way, turned out to be one of the, you know, the classic Star Trek.
By this point in the third season, our production budget had been significantly reduced. And since we didn't have a lot of money to create a complex set, producer Fred Freiberger and Bob Justman came up with a plan to make Spectre of the Gun work. Together with scenic designer Matt Jeffries, they created a surrealistic yet inexpensive set. It ended up working very well. It was a reflection of the fragments of human memory, and at the same time, a solution to our money problems. Here, for the first time in the series history, the characters seem to actually have learned something through their previous experiences. Spock looked back at Catspaw, the Squire of Gothas, and the cage. Kirk remembers the bluff from the Corbomite maneuver. He decides to forge ahead while facing a dangerous situation. And that's why he was Captain Kirk.